It had been raining that day. It was the kind of rain that falls on the just and the unjust alike. From the highest of the high, clutching their $4 cups of Gourmet Joe, to the lowest of the low, like me, clutching my $4 cup of Gourmet Joe. It was the kind of cold, wet rain that mixes with the dirt on the ground, turning it to mud. The kind of thick, sticky mud that clings to the bottom of your shoes no matter how hard you try to avoid it. The kind of mud that, when you kick off your shoes in the garage, dries to a hard cake of disappointment. That when you go out to get your shoes the next day, you gotta scrape off with a stick so you don't track little bits of crusty dried mud through the house. The kind of little bits of crusty dried mud that when she finds them on the living room floor, your mom tells you to get a vacuum and clean them up. Maybe even questions where you were born and suggests that it may have been in some agricultural outbuilding. Yeah, it was the kind of rain that could suck the joy right out of you, or at least out of your iPod if you didn't keep it dry. Except it didn't really affect me. It had pretty much stopped by the time I got off work. I did notice that the ground was a little wet though as I walked out to my car. My boys were waiting for me when I got to the corn maze that night. They had the kind of looks on their faces that said they were excited to be there, which is kind of sad when you think about it, since after all it was really only just a bunch of corn made into a maze by a guy who had a pig named Magnum P.I.G. Okay, I guess that's pretty cool. Once I'd figured out who to call if we got completely lost and someone needed to go to the bathroom, we trudged off into the corn like a small group leader and his boys, hoping for some diversion to punctuate the dreary forward march of time. I guess the challenge of the maze wasn't really what I needed to lift my spirits that night, because it wasn't working, even with a bunch of 6th grade boys and all the running and yelling and farting jokes. Now that I think back on it, I think what I really needed that night was a good polka.